How much of the world needs to be created in the pilot?
You know, that's an interesting question. I would say, again, it sort of depends on the show, right? If you are writing a genre or a fantasy show, I think you need to have a sense of what rules need to absolutely be clear in the pilot, especially if it involves magic or it involves superpowers or anything like that. Executives tend to get a little mystified by that stuff, so clear rules are very helpful to them. Even if you know that you're going to build off on that and expand on that as you continue the writing process, if it becomes a show, what's absolutely essential in the pilot that your audience knows? And so that's part of your world building, right? Is like, okay, in this, if you're writing a fantasy show, let's say that in this kingdom, there's this kind of magic. And in this kingdom, there's this kind of magic. And here's what happens when that kind of magic, bumps up against each other. That might be all we need to know in the pilot, but make sure that the rules of all that are very clear. If you're writing more of a sort of, let's say, like a Grey's Anatomy kind of show, you really want the characters to pop. You want to be sure that each character is incredibly distinct and that we understand what's most important to you about those characters from the pilot. Now, you're also creating a scenario that's going to tell us how the show works. So, for instance, using Grey's as an example, interns in a residency program, all the stuff getting thrown at them, and then also commiserating with each other and building a relationship with each other to get through it. Easy to understand. That's what the show is, but that's all set up in the pilot. So a lot of times what you'll hear is, what's the engine? And it really is about what is helping the audience understand what to expect every week. So if it's a cop show, we understand that we get a case every week. Or if it's like, say, Bosch on Amazon, we maybe have multiple cases that we're going to follow through the season. And every week we're going to get more pieces of the puzzle. And we're also going to get all this personal stuff going on. But you establish that in your pilot. Like, this is kind of how the show works. So to me, that's the most important stuff. And you can always add more to the world later. A lot of times what will happen is exactly as I was telling you in that other pilot, I had to clear some characters out. Sometimes you're like, I really want to introduce this character in the pilot because you know they're going to be in the entire show. But it just is taking up room in that pilot in a way that's just a disservice to the story. And so you have to be brave enough to pull it out and hold it for later in the series, because what's most important is that what the show is incredibly clear by the time someone finishes reading that pilot. They understand the show that you're trying to make. They definitely should have questions about is this thing going to pay off? And is this character going to come back? And, they'll have all kinds of questions because you want open-ended things. You want there to be mysteries and wondering about how the characters are going to interact with each other. But how the show will work every single episode is what you're really trying to get across, on top of your cool characters and your awesome world and all that stuff. You're painting that picture for them.
How does a writer end a pilot?
So one of the first things that I got taught when I started writing pilots is certainly in a I'm trying to break into the business, I'm writing samples part of the pilot writing process. You do not hold anything back story-wise in the pilot. So if you're like, all this stuff's going to happen in the pilot, and then we're going to open episode 2 with the chase and a crash and this character's going to die, I'm going to tell you that's the end of your pilot, right? Because you want to go big emotionally or action-wise or something. You want it to be like, bam, at the end of your pilot. So I wrote a pilot where it's about this political family, and it's 100% when you read it, you're like, oh, this guy's going to die. He's going to die. He's totally going to die. And then he doesn't die. Someone else dies at the end of Act 5. And everybody's so mad at me. So mad at me when they read it. But then Act 6 is telling you exactly where we're going. It's like where the family members are left now that the anchor has fallen away, and what's going to happen. And it goes out on this sense of like, oh my God, how are they going to survive this? Because you're like, how are they going to survive it? That's what you want someone to say to you right at the end of that pilot. If you're doing a mystery pilot, you can do that thing where we think we're at the end of the episode. It feels like we've had like this really exciting, fulfilling hour, and then like the screen goes black, and then you write, but then a door opens and a figure walks through, and we know everything's about to change. Out. It's like that kind of stuff that like really makes them want to know what happens in the next episode. So it can be description, it can be a line of dialogue. It's whatever it is to you that says, gotta come back next week. And that's really, really true when you're starting to write them. People want to hold things back because they're like, but then later. Well, right now there's no later. There's only this. If you sell this pilot, you can say, hey, I'd really love to pull this out and hold it for later. But right now, you just want them to be blown away by your writing. So I've heard writers say this. It has not really been my experience, but it does happen to a lot of writers that oftentimes how you think your pilot ends is really how your pilot begins. Not a rule, but sometimes if people are telling you it just moves too slow or it just doesn't feel like it has enough momentum, that's a thing to try, is pull the ending up and then write from that and see what happens.
And that's not like bookending it where you have, okay, that's different.
Not bookending it. That's literally like that cool, amazing moment that you think is the end of the pilot might actually be where we need to start. And then what's in your head as episode 2 is really the pilot, right? So you're using the end of the pilot that you thought you needed and then kind of writing episode 2, which sometimes really works. Sometimes it's like, oh, right, because you were saving all that cool stuff. And you didn't realize it, and now all the cool stuff from episode 2 is in your pilot.
Are there any other tips you have for writing a pilot? Maybe we didn't cover?
I would say this, especially if you're new to television, learning to outline is a really important skill. And so if you have not habitually been a writer who outlines their material, start with the pilots that you're writing at home. And sometimes you can find those examples again, like at the Writers Guild Library or places like that. In my book, The Writer's Room Survival Guide, have a couple of examples of what an outline can look like to just help people start to figure out, what is that? What is this outline thing I have to do? Because the more you practice it at home, the less intimidating it's going to be. When a showrunner's like, great, can you write me a 12-page outline by the end of the week? Like, you're going to be like, sure I can, because you've done it at home, right? So it won't be like a new thing that's getting dropped on you. And it also just is a good guide map. Once you have that outline, writing your pilot's going to be so much easier, because as you're loading in, you're like, okay, and then like, now this is the next scene in the outline. Sometimes you can already be like, oh, wait, I feel like it took us too long to get here. Let me go back really quickly and change this. Or, oh no, actually, I think this goes later. I'm going to hold this scene and do it later. As opposed to you being on the fly, trying to make it all up as you're going along. So it's a really good skill to have. It's very necessary in television writing. So I would start practicing it now at home. And whatever your thing is that you love while you write, I happen to write to television because I'm a classic latchkey kid who did her homework with the TV on. But music, quiet, whatever it is, embrace it, love it. Just know that when you become a TV writer, if you have a boss who says, please work in the office, you're going to have to find a way to make that work for you. For me, I was lucky because I came along when streaming existed. So I could still put TV on and just put my headphones in and have Friday Night Lights playing in the background while I wrote. So, but however your writing jam, works for you, you will have to create a version of that works in an office where people can walk in your door and interrupt you and do all those things. So just remember that it's very different once you become a working TV writer.